Hello and welcome back, everyone. Happy Sunday. Today we are going to be doing a rundown of Dev Diary number 5 for Civilization 7, which goes over combat, which I am very, very excited to get into. But before we get into it, I just wanted to note that the content embargo for Civilization 7 has been lifted. So if you are interested in Civilization content in general and not necessarily watching what I've done, I do not have early access to the game. There were plenty of creators that did have early access to the game. So if you actually wanted to see gameplay rather than get my opinions on these Dev Diaries, there's other content out there available for you now. But that said, if you do want to be, strapped in for the ride, strap on, because we are going to be talking about combat, which has been a very contentious thing, in Civilization history in terms of the player base. Specifically, there was a change from Civilization 4, which allowed you to stack units and build these doom stacks, and so you would just stack 50 units on top of each other, and then you just go at it, and Civilization 5 and 6, which brought in a tactical system, which the Civilization community is generally pretty split on whether or not they think this is good or bad, but what the tactics situation allows you to do is it takes it into a mini game where now you're also playing a tactics war game. But in my opinion, what it allows you to do is really abuse the AI, because the AI is terrible at tactics, and probably more interesting for multiplayer, but specifically versus the AI, I think it forces you to give really stronger and stronger advantages to the AI in terms of asymmetric advantages, like you're giving them more gold, production, research, more starting settlers, this type of stuff, in order to make the game challenging. And I'm not a fan of these asymmetric advantages, so I actually prefer the old combat system that allowed unit stacking. And so coming into this is something, a tension, which I don't know how they're resolving it yet, but I'm hoping that it gets resolved in this video. And so I'm excited to go through it. So let's get into it. Hey, Civ fans. Hey, Sarah here. That is good old Sarah, handing it off to the other dev. I assume she's the community manager. But for our last Dev Diary of the year, we are, by the way, reading some old Dev Diaries. We've got to one of the many you have probably been waiting for, a deep dive on combat. Everyone's kind of, or was kind of like, well, how are they going to handle it? Authored by Senior, game designer Brian Felges, this Dev Diary will go over the history and role of combat in the Civilization franchise, talk about the impact of being brought by our new exciting Commander military unit, and additional improvements being made for Civilization 7. I'm hoping that even if it does stay tactical, they introduce more levels of stacking that make it harder and harder to really gum up the terrain and have a huge advantage over the AI. But we do see a little kind of snippet of some various military units, and hello Civ community. My name is Brian Felges. I'm of course reading this. My name is not Brian Felges. I have been working on the Civilization series in one form or another since I started at Fire Access back in 2006, but my first credit as a designer began when we started working on Civilization 6. I've always had an affinity for war games, so at the time I was more than excited to immerse myself in the military and combat systems for Civ 6. Today, I'm excited to share all those changes, improvements, and new features coming to Civilization 7's combat, as well as a bit of our general design philosophy. This is what I'm going to be kind of probably most interested in here, is gleaning what exactly they are trying to accomplish, because again, I do not like the tactics system insofar as the AI is really bad at playing it, and so you have to compensate in other ways. I would rather have more of an economic and civilization building be the point at which the character or the player expresses a skill over the AI rather than the military tactics. Military conflict has always been a central component of the Civilization series and has remained as one of the main victory types since the series' inception. Even if you don't plan to conquer the world with your military might, a good army and understanding of combat basics are still important, as you still need to be able to defend your civilization from rival powers and ambitious independent powers. A bit of history. The way war has been waged in Civilization has changed throughout the series' history. I think we're going to get into unit stacking here. Originally, players could stack multiple units in a single map tile, known as the community of Stacks of Doom stacks, and battles were fought by clashing these stacks together. After a few units' strength was compared and a bit of random dice rolls, a winner was determined, and the result was often the defeat of an entire enemy army in one fell swoop. Which I don't really necessarily have a problem with, but you could introduce some sort of retreating mechanics, this type of thing. But the release of Civilization 5 brought some big changes, including a switch from square tiles to hexagons and the introduction of a 1 unit per tile rule for combat. So now This means you will have far fewer units. The units are a lot more important, and the units can really gum things up. And the fact that you could gum things up, have defensive-oriented positions, and really abuse the AI with the use of ranged units and kind of like lure them into trappy areas, this is like how you generally kind of beat the AI. This added a new layer of depth to combat, shifting it away from the stacks of doom that dominated the battlefield towards a more tactical approach. Different types of units still had many strengths and weaknesses as before, but now battles were fought in a series of single unit versus unit combats spread throughout the map. Players could strategically place units on movements and terrain and take advantages of ranged attacks to soften up their enemies before moving to engage in melee combat. So often you would get it so that you would have, 2 or 3 squares of frontage against their 1 or 2 squares of frontage with your melee units because of strategic placing, and then you'd have several ranged units behind, so they would just kind of walk in and then they'd get diced up. The combat design and also you can. The AI was not very good at moving around terrain and playing around terrain. This combat design continued in Civilization 6, but there were some side effects in switching to the 1 unit per tile. Stacks of Dooms became replaced by Carpets of Doom, where map would often get congested with units, especially in the late game. This is true. Just having very large amounts of units, you could gum stuff up forever and prevent wars from being as decisive. Although this is less the case versus the AI, and this is more of a multiplayer consideration, in that the AI would often throw away their units anyways. This called for some slight design changes, like giving player the ability to join units together into a single hex, allowing for the safe escort of defenseless units like settlers or workers, or by joining combat units of the same type into a single stronger version of itself. This is fair enough as an adjustment. You would get, core, which would be 2 units stacked together, and armies, which are 3 units stacked together. Nevertheless, this is key part, traffic jams would still occur, and moving an army of units from one map location to another could become cumbersome and time-consuming endeavor. Yep, because all your auto moves would cancel if the square they were trying to move on became occupied. So with Civ 7, we aim to introduce several new changes with the military and combat systems, improving on our previous designs and providing some new and interesting gameplay opportunities. We have commanders. The most prominent change, I don't like this. This is not how I wanted this sentence to start. The reason I don't like this is because to me this implies that we're keeping the tactical system and we're not going back to stacks. But let's see how it shakes out. With again, me being less warfare oriented, I of course am less oriented towards the tactics, and I don't care as much about that type of stuff. And I would rather have the AI be able to perform better militarily, which if you can't outmaneuver the AI as well, they will, relative to you, will perform better. The most prominent change to Civ 7's combat is the introduction of commander units. These powerful military units have the ability to pack nearby units into a single stack. Units stacked together with a commander will benefit from its movement bonus, allowing for faster relocation to where they need to be. Upon arrival, the commander's army unpacks, deploying to adjacent titles, ready to attack enemy forces, lay siege to cities, or defend territory. This seems a little bit similar to... Doesn't Humankind use a system like this where you would stack units? It wouldn't have a commander, but you would stack like 6 units into a single army, and then you would have a mini tactical battle that would take several turns within a single turn of Humankind. Did I say millennia? I meant Humankind. And so this, it certainly makes the map less gummed up, but we're still having the same tactics system, which I'm not surprised that they are looking to keep the tactics system, okay. We do see these guys are unpacked, and we will be... This guy looks like he's about to bonk himself with his mace. You gotta watch out, my guy. That's not what it's used for. Commander units are distinct in that they are only units capable of gaining experience and unlocking promotions. This is interesting. Even though it seems that we're going to be staying with a more tactics-oriented system, I do like that they are making personal characters, i.e. the commanders, a little bit more more central here. Like, especially if you can get named commanders, this type of stuff, this would be interesting. But yeah, normally individual units gain experience, but now the commander gains experience. Maybe you name them. Maybe you name them Hannibal Barca. Shout out. This marks a shift from previous Civ games where individual combat units could earn promotions. Commanders gain experience primarily through battles involving nearby troops, and the promotions grant a variety of buffs and bonuses, whether it's raising the combat strength of the units within their command radius to gaining more yields when stationed in a city district. That second one is a little bit intriguing. Just having a commander unit on the battlefield gives you an edge in combat. Having an experienced commander lead your forces is essential for military-focused players. Commanders are even ageless. Throughout the game, they retain all their experience and promotions earned in past ages, ensuring their continued dominance on the battlefield. I have mixed feelings about this. Commanders in Civ 6 would only apply to their bonuses to units of a proper age, and so they would eventually somewhat become obsolete as you start to get later and later units. I think it might be the proper age or anything earlier. And so in this sense, commanders would eventually lose their efficacy. But I suppose if you're making them into sort of governor commanders, a sort of secondary character beyond so you're playing as a character when you play a leader, but in this sense they're like kind of secondary leaders and this sort of thing. Maybe this makes some sense. It's a little bit, I mean, it's interesting. I do like the unpacking system from a logistics perspective. Like, if we're going to keep the tactical system, the notion that you pack up inside of Commander and then you, like, march out and then you unpack, I think that this is a big improvement. The range of promotions Commander can earn is vast, encompassing multiple themed discipline trees. These allow players to spec their commanders in different ways by deep diving into a single tree or spreading their proficiency across multiple trees. There are unique types of commanders for ground, naval, aerial combat, each with slightly different discipline trees. For army commanders on the ground, the discipline trees are Bastion, defensive bonuses aimed at keeping your army healthy when attacked. This is probably, generally defensive play is kind of our playstyle, but Assault. Offensive bonus designed to give you an edge when you're taking the initiative. Logistics, operation focus bonuses enable you to increase the size of your army and more. We do like some logistics though too. Maneuver focuses on movement, making it easier to navigate the map. Maneuverability and speed is almost always like a very, very strong. In most strategy games of various kinds, especially RTSs, just the ability to move stuff around quicker is really, really strong. I'm not sure if it's going to be as valuable in Civ though, relative to kind of other games, because often maneuverability allows you to abuse weaker units with your stronger units and avoid getting abused in a similar way, and allows you to pick which asymmetries you want to fight just in a sort of general sense. So like if you're playing Age of Empires, which is an RTS, having a cavalry unit makes it so you could take your cavalry and you just run away from all the spearmen and you just go and find villagers and you kill the villagers and attack the eco. Now, of course, you do walls and various other things to prevent people from attacking your eco in this way, but the idea is you have a unit that would lose in a 1v1 on a per resource basis, like a knight versus a spearman, and then you just avoid the fight because you have maneuverability. So the ability to pick when and where the fights happen is really critical. But in Civilization in general, I think it's probably less important because can you maneuver around and abuse weak units is probably the thing, or can you fight a defensive battle and then take someone else's city before they could take yours would be another thing. And often it feels like it takes too long in Civilization games past to march past an enemy army and take their city while they're trying to take your city and base race them. Like that generally seems not as viable, but maybe with a maneuver bonus, some strategies like that would be a lot more viable. So having a defensive commander defend against an army and a maneuver commander try and find the weakest city in order to peel off of the enemy nation you're fighting. Maybe this is a strategy you can employ, which is like more of a macro strategy, and the AI is probably bad at responding to that, but more of a macro strategy than a tactical. The difference between strategy and tactics: strategy is big picture, tactics is small execution. It's still something you could abuse the AI in, but it's not, well, I guess it kind of is tactical maneuvering. Okay, leadership. Bonuses that focus on the commander unit itself, reinforcing your impact on the battlefield. So It's a bit interesting. I wonder which one of these are going to have the most economic bonuses, or they're going to maybe all have little economic bonuses somewhere in the tree, probably later, something like this. But okay. In addition to making combat units more effective in battle, commanders also have the ability to use special actions to order multiple units within a command radius at once. These include attack orders, which come with additional combat bonus, as well as orders to heal, repair, or start digging fortifications. So this is attractive in the sense that if you order everyone simultaneously, that's less clicking. Which means that if you move from having not a lot of commanders in the early game and controlling a lot of units individually to having more commanders in the late game and controlling a lot of stuff through group actions, then this reduces the amount of clicks and kind of reduces the tedium entering the late game. So if that's the idea, I do think that this is pretty good from a design perspective. Similarly, you can use Pact Army to overrun weaker units, negating the need to deploy and fight separately, which of course is great. Finally, commanders streamline your ability to conduct military campaigns from a distance. Battles seldom come without casualties, and players often find themselves needing to bring fresh units or battle particularly challenging sieges. Oh, please, deployment help. Shuffling replacement units from the to the front line can take time and is distracting from the battle at hand. So we introduced the commander's ability to request reinforcements, automating the process of bringing new units to their location to join the fray without requiring the player to manage each unit's movement individually. This is fantastic. This is a great change. So in a sense, we're not really getting exactly what we wanted in terms of the tactics, not being as much at the forefront, but this is to some degree expected. But it seems like removing a lot of tedium from the moving of a whole bunch of different units with this new commander system seems to be like what they have in terms of design principle, and so far it's looking great. Altogether, commanders add a new dynamic to combat and greatly reduce the amount of micromanagement needed from the player. We're looking forward to see how you utilize these powerful units in your campaigns to come. Siege warfare. In Civilization 7, settlements now sprawl beyond the city center in addition to the urban districts. Thus, changes to our siege mechanics have been updated as well. Alright, fair enough. It's more sprawling. I forget which game kind of does this. I think it's Humankind. From a defensive perspective, players can fortify their cities by constructing walls around their urban districts and building special military buildings or wonders. In order for the attacking force to take the settlement, they need to conquer and control each of these tiles before taking the city center. Interesting. I do kind of like this because it makes it take a long time to take a sprawling urban city, more than just having an abstraction where that city just has more combat strength. It actually feeling like you're slowly occupying the city instead of just like waiting for the number to go far enough down and then you just insta-flip the city. On the flip side, destroying walled districts and occupying them will cede control of that district to you, depriving the defender of any yields or benefits. Very cool as well. Because of these changes, the pace and difficulty of taking a settlement varies greatly and adds a wrinkle of strategy on how you expand your empires. If you choose to build rapidly and not invest in any defense, you might find it difficult to maintain control of settlements on the frontier of your civilization. If you want to take over a fortified town or city, you'd likely need to build siege units who specialize in taking down walls. You'll even have to think about your towns or cities on navigable rivers. Naval forces can sail inland and capture settlements if you don't defend them properly. Everyone who's like always like, oh, why can't we go upriver? They're super happy now, except someone was asking me about this in the comments, but yeah, it seems like you can sail inland. I don't know if you can navigate inland or how navigable the rivers are, and maybe some rivers are navigable and others aren't. We also see improved visual battlefields. One of the characteristics of the one unit per tile combat is that battles tend to happen one at a time, with each unit attacking and defending in turn. Typically, this means that on your turn, you attack some enemy units, often not resulting in outright destruction. When it's not your turn, the same thing happens to you. Visually, this was shown when the attacker moves forward to engage in battle animation, then returns to their original position. Watching multiple units do this in a sequence sometimes looks comical. Yeah, this is true. The overall aesthetic was a lot more comic-y of Civ 6, though, as well. This is a lot more realistically grounded. I think I kind of like the cartoony look of Civ 6 a little bit more overall. Although the execution of the graphics, I do like this too. It's just the like themey of the graphics. Like a group of bad guys waiting their turn to attack the protagonist in a cheesy action movie. True. A game journalist once likened this combat in 4X games to a hilarious Monty Python sketch where a man prances forward, slaps another man in the face with a fish, and prances back. I couldn't help but laugh at the truth of that in comparison, and it was something we had noticed as well. Still, it was a necessary presentation of the way that we so far have handled combat in Civ games. It was around that time that our units team asked whether they needed to have the units stop fighting and move back to their hacks at all. What if, even though the combat was resolved in-game, we just allow the units to continue fighting until one of the units is destroyed or the turn ends? This quickly turned to one of those moments where the function follows form and sparked a change in how we handle combat flanking mechanics in game. Interesting. In the past Civ games, we've never introduced any sort of unit-facing mechanics you'll often find in strategy war games, meaning it didn't particularly matter what direction you attacked or were attacked from. Direction of attack matters if you want to simulate flanking, but we thought details like this were too fiddly for Civ players, fair enough, who were already thinking about managing their empire on so many different scales. This is also like one of the... In games, this is often like something where, you know, you have a layer that you could add to add depth or complexity to a certain system, but like Civ, for example, you're doing so many different systems simultaneously that you have to ask yourself, okay, is it worth it? So if it was just a tactics game, of course you would want flanking, but considering you're doing so much other stuff, you know, you have to ask, is this worth the trade-off? Because players will feel bad if they can't execute, but this is also just another spot in which you can crush the AI. With the game's overall reduction in micromanagement and our desire to support the unit's team idea of continuous combat visuals, we felt comfortable implementing proper flanking bonuses without requiring the player to designate a specific direction for each turn. This means you didn't have to pick a direction before battle. Engaging an enemy automatically locks 2 units in the front, and now that they have a front, you can attack from sides and behind. I do like that we get locked into a front after we've attacked, it's not the case that we have to micromanage. A system I would not like is one where we have to micromanage as we are moving the unit which direction it's facing. Some games do this. It adds like some layer of depth, but I think I personally find that a little bit tedious if we're managing a lot of other things in the game. But if it only locks once we already have attacked once, then I kind of like it. And now we have opportunity for a flanking bonus. And now that they have a front, you can attack the sides and behind. Having a continuous combat is a win-win for both the unit team and the combat design team in Civilization 7. So we're both making it look better and also introducing the ability to flank and this sort of thing. We can see that the purple army is largely surrounded by this green army, right? And they're fighting on the fronts. The purple army's here, and it's here, so that's kind of a little bit awkward. But if one of these units gets cleaned up, right? If these green macemen get cleaned up, then they're gonna... These purple guys here are gonna flank these spearmen, and they're going to be in for a bad time, right? But I'm not sure we see any flanking happening exactly, other than we are seeing the continuous battles. I think in terms of the UI, we have to see how it plays when we play it, but this looks pretty clean cut and visually clear as to what's going on. Next up is finding balance. Inner peace, as they like to call it. Part of the appeal of Civilization game is that it's made up of many different systems, yes, all working in concert to represent an epic scale of managing a historical civilization. When you work on Civilization, you quickly learn that if there are 10 Civ players in a room, you get 10 different opinions on which part of the game is most fun. Definitely the case. For me, warfare is less interesting, which of course is why I'm advocating for less tactics. Every player is different, and not all players enjoy the military part of the game as much as others. True, as I mentioned earlier, combat has always been a necessary part of building and managing your empire, the truth hurts. For game designers, our challenge is to create a combat experience that is fun for both players looking to dabble in skirmishes while still offering enough depth and reward for those pursuing a full-scale military campaign. Finding that balance is always tricky, but we think we have something special with the new features, adjustments, and changes introduced in Civilization 7. We look forward to seeing what strategies and tactics you use to conquer the world or successfully protect your empire so that it may stand the test of time. So we do get a little bit of kind of update in combat. It looks like as this, it's going to be mostly similar to Civ 6. However, these new commanders might become very, very pivotally important, and that's exciting to see, and they do seem to really, really help the logistics of moving around the army, which is fantastic. It seems like not necessarily, or so like, it seems overall it's going to be similar to Civ 6, but with a whole bunch of polish that reduces the level of micromanagement we have to take, and the new commander system, maybe this does create asymmetries where you will want to fight differently in different conditions. Like if you have a defensive commander, you want to fight a particular way. If you have a maneuver commander, you fight in a completely other way in terms of how you execute. This would be... It'll be interesting to see if this plays out. I'm excited to see how it plays out in multiplayer as well. And I know the multiplayer competitive scene is it's a scene in Civ 6, and I think that if you are going to introduce more texture and depth to military, that at a certain point playing against the AI becomes less fun, but it does make stuff more interesting for multiplayer. So generally my objections to there being skill expression in military is only contained to the single player experience and not the multiplayer experience, where I think skill expression is valuable. I'm not as interested in expressing skill on that axis, but it is something that you're not sacrificing, you're not sacrificing the AI to like the like in the same way you'd like sacrifice a virgin to the deity or god or whatever, where you're just like you're gonna be really bad at this game now by introducing the military, because players can be reasonably good at the military even if that's not the primary axis upon which they acquire an advantage. Anyways, that's kind of a little bit tangential on game design, I think, but also I think that I think I like the flanking. I think I like the flanking, of course, for multiplayer. It's really going to depend on if they can actually make the AI play a lot better. If the AI plays pretty well, suddenly I don't have a lot of my objections. And so in a world where we're concerned with the game as a simulation, not the game as we expect it to be with the AI as we expect it to be it, I do think flanking is a nice thing to introduce to the game. And visually, this looks so much nicer than the units like charging forward and like moving back to their squares and this type of thing. So I'm pretty happy to see this kind of as the combat thing. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. We're going to be getting through the rest of these Dev Diaries. Other than that, notification bell too. We always forget the notification bell, which is actually probably the most important one, because it lets you know when we've posted something so you don't miss anything, which, for us will also increase the number of videos that the average person watches. Of course, don't want people to watch stuff they're not interested in, though. But anyways, that's a digression. Other than that, have a happy Sunday. Bye-bye now.